you're doing the report on that.
Yes.
There's no board meeting next week.
Okay, welcome everyone. We have no board meeting next week, and George has got some announcements about.
Just some quick announcements about the hospital budget process. To let you all know that all the hospitals submitted their budgets on time. Currently, the team is verifying and validating that data. We want to make sure that it's accurate when it's shared. We will have a presentation by Mike Davis and his team at our next board meeting on July 26th. And that'll give you the first cut of the data and some of what we're seeing in terms of trends and what the hospitals have presented us with. Then on August 14th, there's going to be a public hearing, which is going to be broadcast through VIT around the state on the hospital budgets. And ahead of that, we're going to post some information and distribute some information to try and encourage conversation and engagement. And then after that point, between August 14th and September 15th, 17th, really, since it's Saturday, when the board has to make a decision on all of the budgets, there may be some individual conversations we have with the hospitals based on other questions we have with them. So looking forward to your questions on August 26th. Mike is currently in the weeds in data, which is why he's not here to carry this message.
All right, thank you. We have minutes of, how many meetings here?
This one, June 21st.
Oh, I see minutes. Okay, we have minutes of the June 21st meeting of the board.
Move to approve minutes of Thursday, June 21st, 2012.
Second.
Any questions or changes? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Okay, thanks. So now we are moving on to an update on certificate of need and insurance carrier rate review from Judy.
109 already. Good afternoon. I didn't do a PowerPoint. I didn't want to be repetitive in my presentation to you, so I'm just going to speak. I didn't do a handout. First thing I want to talk about, though, is what we're doing in rate review, because that has really, we've moved ahead so much since we last spoke about it. As you all know, we've now had a dozen reviews, and all of those decisions have been issued. In those, we had, we actually have none that are deemed complete right now, so we don't have anything within our 30-day window. Kind of a nice breather for everyone and for us to kind of look back and figure out some things that we had been working on before that got a little bit delayed because of the onslaught of filings. We accepted recommendations of the Commissioner of Financial Regulation in all but 3 of the 12. 3 of the 12, as you know, we rejected 1. We disapproved 1 in its entirety, and 2 we further modified. Some of the things that I think we learned out of this is it uses a lot of time and staff, and it's a lot of work for everybody who's reviewing this stuff, and we're learning this anew together, a lot of these things. Some of the feedback I've had from you and some of the important points are we have to figure out how to manage some of this by streamlining our process, giving you the data that you want, that you need, and making that available to the public also on the website, making sure that there's adequate information on the website, public input. We've only had, I believe, 2 or 3 comments on all of these 12 public comments, and they came in during the time that the filings were at Financial Regulation, not to us. We also got to review those. So with our existing resources, we had some things that I think I just want to point out quickly that I know were problems for all. One is that we had filings with as small as 3 covered lives or 24 covered lives, and when you're putting a lot of effort and time into that, I know it seems very frustrating. We have to figure out how we can deal with these micro groups, and some of that problem will go away on its own when the exchange is up and running. But that was a lot of energy towards what seemed to be a product that maybe shouldn't be around anymore, and kind of thinking of ways you deal with that. did have some discussions with financial regulation also about how we can standardize the process. And there's good news in that. They're working on putting together a rate submission form that'll come in right up front. That'll give us a lot of information. Excuse me.
No, I mean.
I know it's not over my shoulder. So that'll give us some information, very concise, right up front, and we'll have that to review also. That's in the process of being kind of finalized, and we should have that soon. And my understanding is it will encompass a lot of the information that we're gonna want. Also, we're going to have a new filing schedule, and that's up to the department really to put together, and they have been discussing this with Blue Cross and doing a lot of legwork on what's gonna work for people. And as you know, doing these quarterly filings has been kind of erratic. We get 6 at once, we still have 4 pending. What it will do is, I looked into this a little bit this morning, trend filings will be semi-annual, but other than that, everything is pretty much annual, although there can be some updated filings, you know, supplementals, which they're allowed to do now anyway. And we were looking at it being probably, this is more or less 36 filings a year down to about 19. So that'll make a big difference for
Just
all of us.
For Blue Cross only, or?
This is for, this is across the board. Wait, no, wait,
Yeah,
this
that's
Blue
Blue
Cross,
Cross.
this Blue Cross, sorry. And when, the difference in that is, it's gonna be phased in, so we're not gonna see this happen right away. But by the fourth quarter 2013, these should all be moved to annual or semi-annual. And it's not implemented, won't be implemented yet, the same for MVP, just for Blue Cross, because right now we are on a quarterly schedule with them, which was recently changed by the commissioners, my understanding. So instead of going back right away to saying, okay, we wanted you to do that, but now we're gonna do this. We're gonna see how this works. So that's good news, and I believe that that schedule, which we'll be sharing at, when it's rolled out, or the financial regulation will be finalized, and that's gonna make a big difference in the Blue Cross part of things.
Judy, is it your sense that the evolution of the quarterly trend filing was in response to volatility in the insurance market? Why did that ever?
Why did that go to
Yeah.
quarterly? You know, I can't answer for that historical piece. I don't know if anybody here can, but I think
Al,
that one
you
of,
can.
When it happened,
Al can, I'm
when
sorry.
there was financial problems with the carriers,
Right.
with some of them, they
So
went
it-
to that so that it would be closer to, you
Closer
could
to
raise your
the-
prices quicker.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
and that's also
think that was
my
one of the-
understanding of what the whole quarterly filing thing was, why we were requiring quarterly on much of this, not just the trend filings, is that it gave us that ability to look closer. Now that we have this 2-step process and we have all these other pieces in place, and we have kind of a better, better guidelines to follow, the scrutiny's different, we have the board looking at things, not only financial regulation. The need for having that hopefully has gone away. It may be at some point, you know, there's questions about doing it just once a year, but right now, I think the message is out, what we're looking for, what we need to find, what is compliant with the ACA and what's compliant with the Vermont Act 48 goals.
Has there been any resistance to the yearly filing transition?
I don't really know, because financial regulation has been meeting with carriers about that and to work out a schedule. Al, do you know, by chance?
I don't know factually. I mean, I've heard anecdotally that they're fine with it, but not with everything. So,
So I think that with having some experience in what we've done, having our rule, it just went to ICAR, and Mike D'Onofrio will speak about that. We're getting a process down that's working better. We're also starting to track these things, so we can look back and say, okay, we looked at that, it was a plan, they asked for 8.4 last quarter, and we can look and at least have some history without having to dig as much. and it's being developed within the board. So I think that's all I really have to update you with, unless you have questions.
Just an observation, I know in talking with Blue Cross about some of their concerns around our review of their administrative filing, they expressed some frustration with the standard form in which they have to submit information, which apparently is driven by the NAIC. And it only allows them to put things in certain categories and not explain much. So as we develop the new format for submitting information, I think it's important to make sure that we at least give them an opportunity to talk about what they feel needs to be in there to better explain the numbers, you know, if you were deviating from the NAIC template.
And one of the things that I see, and I spoke to Phil Keller about today, is it's a little difficult because we're doing this two-tiered, keep it separate review instead of having one big rate review group that works together. We have some of those issues that are decided by them, and they take in the filing in the first instance. So, you know, we're trying to cooperate and make things work smoothly like a machine, you know, but it's some of that will not necessarily be up to us. We're trying not to duplicate what they're already bringing in, what they're already doing, and standardize it so they know what to expect. If you have to do one annual document, that's, you can set your computers to, you know, to provide that data. That won't change each time. Hopefully it's not going to be a lot of work beyond the putting the work in on the front end.
Any other questions or comments from the subject?
I just want to say thank you to Judy and to the entire rate review team for all the hard work and the trial by fire we've all experienced in this area.
We dragged our interns into this one too, so it's, and they really enjoyed it, which is where they said that.
But also that Judy and the team are going to come back in early August to the board with some more of the concrete next steps and processes that we've been discussing conceptually, but you know, some of the, this is what the new forms are going to look like, this is how things are going to work, this is how we're going to work it with the department, since we have a little bit of time now to actually reflect and refine our process moving forward.
Good, thank you.
Okay, next
Now,
is
your next
Judy
subject.
and Kentucky, the UN. And this year, I actually, this is even shorter presentation, partially because the biggest thing going on is we're trying to develop a rule here. And the rule is coming from, as I've discussed before, a very a historically complicated process where we have one person who does this, we have one rule, we have a manual that doesn't even exist electronically, and they're all in BISHCA financial regulation. We're starting anew, but we can't.
Electronic.
What's that?
It doesn't exist electronically. It's like in a binder.
It's there's a paper form and there's paper, and yes, that's my understanding. We haven't located one yet, at least. But then again, in some ways, it's very good because we really didn't want to just rehash a lot of what's been done, but there has to be continuity. Don Jerry will be over working with us. She couldn't be here again today. She's out this week, and we did start a draft. There's something on paper greatly reduced from what there had been before, but there's still questions about what we really need to define there. What is, why did we do some things before? Was there a reason and we're missing it? And so that's going to be open for more discussion before it even really makes the draft form to hit your plates, which was hopefully today, but honestly, we have to get it done quickly, and it's going to take a lot of energy, but we really want it to be done right and carefully, and it's looking at a lot of other states, looking at what we've done and the history here. The history pretty much comes through Mike Davis and Donna, and we have a lot of questions as to why certain things have been done and what the stakeholders think about it. We did have a good meeting with stakeholders. I think we had 7 persons outside of the board and staff came in for a meeting at the end of June, and we sat down and discussed what the goals were, the simplification. Hopefully the process is somewhat multi-tiered in that if you fit a certain criteria, you can skip steps 1 and 2, which don't apply to you, making things a little more user-friendly, applicant-friendly, expectations very clear of what the board is looking for when they're going to be reviewing any of these things, and understanding why we review some things in more depth than we'll be reviewing others.
Any questions on CMAC?
Mike is also going to speak a little more because he's
Just about the rule, the
where
rule
we're
process.
going and what we're going to be doing.
Any other subjects you want to talk about today?
You don't want to hear it. Thanks. Don't open the floor for that.
All right, thank you, Judy. So
Thanks.
we're gonna move on to
Public
Donna.
comment on that topic.
Oh, sorry, I'm not, I require retraining. We are doing our new public comment format, which is if you want to comment on a specific agenda item, we'll do it as we work through the agenda. So at this point, you can comment on Judy's performance. You can comment on the subjects of certificate of need or rate review. Any comments from anyone? Or questions? Okay. So now we go on to Nafrio.
Okay, should I go sit over there?
Yeah. Right,
Yes, I can tell you didn't really care.
Take your agenda.
This, unlike last time, there are still people in the room. I'm gonna chase you all away
I
now.
was going to say, you can change that quickly.
I probably will. So this is just to update you on where we're at with rulemaking, which we're having a big push this summer because, and you all have some slides. I'm not projecting them. I think there were paper copies available for the multitudes. So we have 3 rules in the pipeline this summer, just to remind everybody. Act 171 requires the board to adopt by January 1 rules governing the health insurance rate review process that Judy talked about, the hospital budget review process, and the certificate of need review process. Just in terms of where we are with each process, we're obviously, based on Judy's report, we're doing rate review. The process is currently governed by the expedited rule that you adopted in April, pursuant to authority in the Budget Adjustment Act. The hospital budget process, Act 171, authorizes you to use the existing rule that the department developed some years ago for this year's hospital budget review, and that's how that will operate. So the rule that we're working on now will be for next year's process. And certificate of need, you inherit that role January 1. So at the moment, that work is being done by the department under their existing rule. Moving to the next page here, just some specifics on where we are with rate review. At the last board meeting, which was June 21st, you approved a draft of the rate review rule to submit to ICAR. We filed the rule with ICAR on June 26th. That got us on their agenda for their July 9th meeting, which was Monday. They reviewed and approved the rule at that meeting with a few recommendations for some adjustments to be made in some of the forms, the rule cover sheet and the economic impact statement. So we've made those changes, and we will file the rule with the Secretary of State's office shortly, tomorrow, Monday, something like that. The rule itself has not changed based on ICAR's review. The only changes were in the kind of the cover forms that go with it. The most challenging thing to fix in the forms was actually the presence of phantom spaces. They have a form set up that you can type information into, and I had a version.
I just didn't see this coming.
Yeah. So. Is anybody still here?
This is where the audience.
So we were in ICAR, and one of the members of the committee said, I'm sorry, but there are these weird spaces, like in the middle of words and stuff, and the version I had printed on my computer was perfect. So and we've determined through a lot of experimentation yesterday, it really is random depending on what computer and printer you use to print the thing. But we have a pristine version now to move along in the process.
You should probably use a single printer system.
I agree. And we have isolated that printer, and we intend to use that printer and only that printer.
And no one else is allowed to use that printer.
The rule printer. And just to give you a sense of the rough timeline, when we file with the Secretary of State, the Secretary of State will publish within 2 weeks of filing to basically notify the public there's this new rule in the works. We can then schedule a public hearing not sooner than 30 days after that publication date, and we'll do it as soon as we possibly can after the publication date, which will put us in the first half of September. Figuring that we'll take a little time to process any input we receive from the public, I'm targeting end of September to file the final proposed rule with the Secretary of State and LCAR. And then LCAR has a window of time during which they'll bring us in to a meeting and look at the rule. So that rule is on track to be in place before January 1. Moving on to the next page, hospital budget review. I've provided to each of you a draft rule that I'd like at the end of my piece today to ask that you approve, you authorize me to distribute that draft rule, post it on the website, distribute it to stakeholders for comments before filing with ICAR. The timing on that is I would like to present the next draft of the rule to you at the July 26th meeting. So we'll be asking for a quick turnaround on any comments on that rule so that we can incorporate those and seek your approval to keep that moving. I spoke about this at the last meeting, so I'll be brief now. The hospital budget rule the hospital budget review pieces of the current rule sit within the department's overall rule for the unified healthcare budget, which was developed the last time around with the unified healthcare budget. So we've sort of taken those elements out and made a standalone hospital budget rule for the board's purposes. The review process will have the same basic structure as it's had traditionally. In speaking with Mike Davis and others, it seems that structure provides enough structure but enough flexibility to get the job done. So the rule will be flexible, and the specific sort of detail and guidance and reporting requirements will come out of the uniform reporting manual, which Mike and his team work with and supplement each year. And then the other changes from the language that currently exists is there was a certain amount of updating that needed to be done to kind of bring things current, eliminating references to the Public Oversight Commission, things like that. So that is kind of where we stand on the hospital budget rule. The next slide is an update on certificate of need. Again, at the last board meeting, I had indicated that we were shooting to have a draft of the certificate of need rule for you at this meeting. It's a much more substantial rule that we started with, and we just decided we needed a bit more time. So we'll bring a draft hopefully to the next meeting. And again, this will be an initial draft that we'll be asking you to authorize us to circulate to stakeholders in the public for comment before filing. As Judy mentioned, we had a very good meeting with a number of stakeholders on June 26th to get just kind of preliminary thoughts about the rule. We've had some follow-up from that's been very helpful, some written thoughts from Fletcher Allen folks. We're speaking with Laura Pelosi of the Vermont Healthcare Association tomorrow. So, it's good. We're doing a lot of work internally, and we're getting some, kind of front-end feedback from folks who are most involved in the process. And just to sort of remind from last time what we're trying to accomplish with the rule, one of the big things is we're trying to streamline it. It's currently 48 pages, I think mostly single-spaced. So just from a sheer volume standpoint, we're trying to make it something more readable and usable. And Judy's done a tremendous amount on that front already. I think she has a draft down, you know, in the low 20s, just page count now, double spaced. And a lot of that has been simply eliminating statutory language that's repeated in the rule, and again, taking out material that's obsolete and sort of bringing things current. The review process itself, the kind of procedural framework won't change very much because a lot of it's set in statute. And that's another thing that we're keeping in mind, and that I would ask you know, anyone who comments on this rule to keep in mind. If there are statutory changes that we need to make this process as good as it can be, you know, as we're working on the rule, if we bump up against constraints in the statute, we need to kind of be aware of that and think about changes potentially next session. And similar to the hospital budget rule, the rule itself will provide the framework, and we will rework the manual to provide more content and detail inside that framework. The manual will be something that we'll tackle after we get this rule really, you know, into the process, so that'll probably be this fall. The last slide is a little bit out of order, but I just wanted to give you a timetable for the hospital budget rule. Assuming that you approve the rule for circulation today, like I said, we'll be looking to come back in 2 weeks with a draft to ask for your approval to file with ICAR. If we're able to do that, that'll get us on their August 13th agenda. So we should, shortly after that, we should be able to turn around and file it with the Secretary of State. Publication, public hearing, gets us to a late October filing with LCAR, which also has us on track for January 1. Any questions?
Not from me. Any questions from other board members? I don't think so. So are you gonna go into this draft now, or does that come under new business?
I can do whatever is your pleasure.
Okay, why don't we just go into it now?
Okay. I don't have, I mean, I was not planning to kind of page by page it. I can if you like.
Oh, please.
It's, a lot of it is right out of the existing department language. And like I say, I've adjusted where necessary to kind of bring things current, either with the law or just with sort of how things actually are happening.
Anything particularly significant about which we should be aware?
In terms of the adjustments, particularly benchmark adjustments and things there?
Sure. If you look on page 3 at section 3.202, subsection C, lists a number of benchmarks that that the board can include each year in the required information that the hospitals have to report to you. And numbers 1 through 9 are that's the list that's always been there. The last 4 we're proposing to add disease indicators, population health indicators, access indicators, and quality indicators. Sort of the idea there is to sort of match this process up a bit more with the broad charges that this board has in its approach, in its overall approach. Understanding that this is neither an exhaustive list nor a required list. It's a sort of a menu that the board can choose from, you know, in a given cycle. I guess one other change, I mean, this is kind of delving down into the weeds a bit. There's always been a provision, or for a while there's been a provision in the rule that says no hospital can be exempted from public hearings for more than 1 year in a row. And I've proposed deleting that and leaving it to the board's discretion. If there are to be public hearings with the hospitals involved, you know, leaving it to you to decide if a hospital fits the criteria for exemption in more than 1 year, you have that discretion to decide. And I mean, unless you have more specific questions, I I don't plan to sort of page by page that rule.
But you need a motion to distribute this, or just a nod?
I think a motion.
Move that Green Mountain Care Board permit the distribution of Rule 3.000, the hospital budget review for general comment.
A second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. And I should have done this before the motion, I apologize. I just wanted to state for the record, because I told Con I would, and he's not able to be here today. Con, the additional indicators I mentioned that was Con's thinking, and he just wanted me to put on the record that he supports the rule with the changes, and, you know, were he here, I just want to say that for him because he's not here.
If he was here, you would vote for what he suggested?
Yes.
That's good to know.
So just a couple of questions. So we now have 2 weeks where we've just approved a draft. So this now will go to stakeholders, is that?
Right, it'll be posted on our website so that, you know, anybody can look and comment.
Okay.
Yep.
And just in terms of process, this is before we get into any of the formal process, so we can talk through stakeholders and really make changes that reflect what the board wants. If you have any additional comments on it, based on hearing recommendations as well.
Right.
I mean, I don't have any comments right now. Most of my comments would be, we know what we've always done. We've added a few things, but, you know, when you open it up and you're doing it for the first time, you know, what are the stakeholders saying? What could be done better, faster, stronger? What is irrelevant? You know.
I think frankly, this rule is so, it's so flexible and so kind of open in the procedure that it creates. And I think that's good because it allows a lot to happen under that sort of a conversation without changing the rule.
Yeah, there's a lot of may, there's not a lot of shall.
Right.
Or must.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I agree with you totally.
The other thing that just we intentionally put into the timeline is that it will not be filed formally until after the board has completed its decisions in this hospital budget cycle. And that was an intentional choice, so that there's if at the end you want to make changes,
Correct.
you have that time.
Right.
Okay.
I think that's all I got.
All right. Any public comment on the certificate of need, any of the rules for that matter?
So this actually goes into effect in 2015.
The hospital budget
Right.
rule?
Right.
It would apply, it would apply to the budget process that we'll be in the middle of at this time next year.
Right. I mean, technically, it'll go into effect, you know, some date whenever it sort of makes its way through the process, but functionally, right, it'll govern the process for 2013.
Thanks. Lila?
Yeah, Lila Richardson in the Office of Healthcare Ombudsman. I'd like to say that in general, I think it's really great that the board is so clear about the timeframes and the process for the rulemaking, which is very helpful and not the same as a lot of agencies, and frankly. And I just wanted to add one thing for people who may not be as familiar with the APA process as I am, which is in addition to the public hearing, there's a public comment period, which I think has to run at least a week after the public
Yes.
hearing date. And often for people who are interested in commenting on the rule, that's a more convenient and useful forum. And I think it's more useful for the board in lots of ways because it gives a written synopsis of what people's concerns are. I just wanted to emphasize that piece of the APA process.
Thanks.
All right, any other comments or questions? All right, thank you, Mike.
Thank you.
We are moving right along. New business. Georgia, is this all you?
This is all me. I need your approval on 3 separate contracts, please. In order of which they are in your packet to make it easier. On the right side, there's a description of the oncology payment for pilot project, an update on it, as well as a proposal from a contractor, PCD, that has been working with Richard Slesky and the folks involved in this pilot. doing facilitation, collaboration. They've been developing metrics evaluation of the actual pilot program and working with the various stakeholders. This request is for approval to extend the current, it's actually a grant, it's not a contract, it's an odd distinction that I still don't understand, but that's what it is. And it's to basically just execute a grant extension through October 2012 for an amount not to exceed $50,000. The board initially approved a $25,000 grant to PCD for the first phase of this project earlier in the spring. So this would just be tacking on this additional $50,000 for continued work. The document that's titled Vermont Oncology Payment Reform Pilot Project was developed by PCD, and it provides significant detail into what they're hoping to do and what they've already accomplished. We can get more detailed information, but they do give regular reports to Richard about how that pilot's going.
And my understanding is they meet weekly with the project team up in St. Joe.
Yeah. And then we have a steering committee that meets monthly at least.
Anybody have any?
I have a question. We have a number of projects that are being developed now that in a sense are looking at quality indicators. So we have the general first blush attempt that some people were working on the first few months of the board. Now we have specific project-related quality. How are we thinking about harmonizing across these projects, especially when we get to a larger set of kind of basic, we had talked about the 4 areas for outcome indicators of are we moderating cost, are we improving health, are we getting access to coordinated care and so forth. How do something like these particular ones going to relate to the more overall, kind of more report cardy?
So, you'll remember from the approval of the St. J project, they had to fill out the application that requires a listing of the kind of quality indicators that they'll be tracking. Some of that is still under development, so there was sort of a general sense of it in their application, but then there's more work that's going on this summer to define what those are. How they, I'd say they connect with the broader efforts in 3 ways. One is Richard's in charge of all this, so he makes sure he's accountable to us to make it all make sense, and we should continue to ask as specific projects come up, how do those indicators connect with the other ones. 2 is in the evaluation framework that's being used for the blueprint. There's a whole bunch of indicators which are all nationally recognized, standardized indicators that Craig has been using with OnPoint to do analysis, and we'll get into more depth about what those are. And in the fall, in particular around what has been called the HUER, but Georgia and I are determined to rename it something else. Baby HUER. And the quality report, which we're responsible for producing in the fall. So that's 2 ways. And then the third is the dashboard effort that Con and Georgia have been working on beside Jordan, and they're going to bring us a report on that sometime soon.
Yep, early August.
So I think where it ultimately connects is through us. We're supposed to make sure that's happening, but by using kind of nationally recognized, standardized measures, hopefully a lot of that harmonization just happens naturally.
Could I add?
Yeah.
One? Yeah, so there's much consideration right now about ACO applications through CMS. And CMS in their ACO program have specific measures also. Some are, certainly there's the financial measures of the trends. There are patient experience measures. There are some process measures and some outcome measures around quality. So
30-something measures.
33 measures. So those, one thing I would caution against is creating measures for each project and driving everybody crazy. So we are trying to sort of standardize off what is in process or in existence today, and then build from that rather than trying to create everything from scratch. So,
But there will be examples.
And we'll show you those.
Yeah, and there will be examples like this project,
Yeah.
I imagine, where there are, in particular, clinical measures that don't relate to other realms. They're very specific to oncology, but most of them would be standardized across projects.
Hey, Gross, that's pretty much just what I was gonna say, is just one thing to be careful of or cognizant of is that the CMS measures really are just for the Medicare population, not for the population at large, so yeah.
So
So I move we extend the PCD grant contract from July to September 2012, not to exceed $50,000 for the St. John's Ferry Rolana College of Haven pilot project.
second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, thanks.
Next up, in your packet is a request for approval of a bid for actuarial services. As you recall, on June 5th, the board issued an RFP for actuarial services. We received 2 bids on June 25th. Just to remind everyone, these actuarial services will support our work in payment reform, in the hospital budget arena, as well as in insurance rate increases, helping to develop trends and really kind of tie in some of the pieces where we need the actuarial support to do it. Our review process was that Al, Con, and I reviewed all 3 bids, discussed them as a group, and we used a scoring sheet to guide our evaluation, looking at the quality of the bidder's experience, their capacity to perform, their responsiveness, and the program cost and value. We had 2 actually very different proposals. One vendor was a small firm, one was actually rather large. The smaller firm had experience with Medicare Advantage and working for CMS, and a little bit of work with private insurers. The larger firm has significant experience with Vermont and with health reform implementation across the country. Based on our review, we felt that the larger firm had more experience and had a higher capacity to perform the duties that we needed them to do. That was because they're familiar with VCures already. They've used that data set. They've been involved in some of Vermont's health reform initiatives. They also have a team of actuaries across the country, so kind of their bench strength is very deep in this area. And their response included a 3-phase approach to our work. The cost for both vendors was actually pretty comparable, but Alcon and I determined that it would make sense, and thinking that the board would feel more comfortable to put a not to exceed limit on this contract, since it is really ad hoc work. We felt that $75,000 made sense given the per hour cost of the different actuaries and the scope of work that we're proposing. Do you have anything else, Al?
This really was the case of the one that we're recommending, just having a much wider lens and a lens of experience and body of work. So that's primarily where I came down with this.
So the request would be to go with the larger firm, who shall be named later once I've spoken with them, and to direct me to enter into a contract not to exceed $75,000 for 1 year.
Any questions from board members about this? One of the key areas that I'm looking forward to getting input on is the trending. We've had methodologies for trending healthcare expenditures related to our forecast. We're now having to do sort of similar exercise around all of payment reform pilots, and haven't had a lot of in-house expertise to do that. So I think that'll be one of the first things that this person or firm, this large firm, wants to. All right, do I have a motion to?
Move that we direct the executive director to enter into a contract not to exceed $75,000 with the actuary firm to be named later.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks.
And one more. And this isn't all your money for the year, just a lot in one day. The final contract is relates to our hospital budget work, and it's to execute a sole source contract with a gentleman named Michael Long, who's a CPA. and former hospital CFO. In discussions with Mike and in terms of the workload for the hospital budget team, we recognize that not only is the hospital budget process a little bit different this year, so that's putting more pressure, more resource needs onto that team. We're also putting through a hospital budget rule that requires significant attention by that team. On top of that, we're working to develop our new hospital budget tool to have better analytics next year for you. So all of that means that we need a little bit more bench strength in this work. Mike Davis has interviewed a couple of different individuals, felt that this man, Mike Long, and you have his CV in your packet, has the skills and can really hit the ground running in this area to provide the support. I'm predominantly supporting Mike in evaluating financial health of hospitals and systems, looking at liquidity, capital costs and trends, looking at the actual 11 and the proposed 13 information, which is something that the board has requested, has a strong look. And basically just work with Mike as necessary in determining the amount of work that needs to be done. Mike Davis and I think that a contract not to exceed $25,000 should be more than sufficient to cover the services. And we wanted to run through October just to make sure we had enough time to do it. So this request would be to execute a contract with Michael Long, and my apologies that everyone named Mike is involved in hospital finances in the state of Vermont.
At least it's not another Mike D.
Mike D.
We worked hard at that one, but for an amount not to exceed $25,000 through October.
I noticed that he worked for Slivsky. That makes him a little
You know?
suspect.
She didn't ask me about
Uh-oh.
We didn't ask him about you either.
He's a good
And we might have gotten a strong internal recommendation as well for Richard for.
Does he make snowballs? Little snowballs?
Right.
All right, do I have a motion to approve this one?
So moved. Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank
Any
you.
other business, Georgia?
I think that's enough for today.
Anyone else have any other new business? Are we supposed to do public comment on new business?
Yeah.
Sure.
It's not listed on the agenda.
You should. If anyone wants to.
Any additional public comment or questions? All right, thank you. Nice fast work, everyone.